worms that would travel up through the sand vertically and leave a different deposit, and you end up with these nice little bumps on the rock that give you grip. Is that true?
Yes.
Oh, bombshell.
Welcome everyone to the Gary Word Trail Running Podcast. My name is Pat and I'm here with Phil.
G'day.
And Mark.
Nice to be back.
And we are local trail runners. We love the Gary Word trails. We run them all the time. If you're new to this podcast, I recommend that you go back to the first episode to get a good grounding and start from there. We're currently doing a 12-part series describing the Grampians Peaks Trail, one section at a time. Today, we are covering section 7, which is actually from Mount William Car Park to Jimmy Creek. But before we get into specifics about that section, I want to introduce our special guest. We have Dave Willis with us today. Dave, we invited on the podcast because he's a pretty extreme trail runner. He knows a lot about geology. He knows a lot about Gary Word trails. And so, yeah, welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah, so Dave, before we get into this specific section, like just generally, what's your experience of the Gary Word trails?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a local here too. Spend a lot of time out on the trails. Definitely moving here. Fell back in love with trail running. It had been a while.
When did you move here?
Well, about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And just slowly been building more and more ever since then.
So, Dave, you've been a trail runner since before you moved here to Halls Gap, Gary Word kind of area, but you've been a runner for quite a while.
I started probably trail running about 12 years ago. Probably 4 or 5 years of that, I was running pretty consistent ultra marathons up to 100 miles. A few successes, a few failures, and then moved over to America and sort of stopped racing, stopped doing so many Ks. Never stopped running, but then once I came back to Australia, spending a lot of time in the Grampians and then down the coast, started picking up the trail running more and more, moved into town, found all the trails here and just sort of got hooked again.
A funny reflection, I suppose. We all refer to trail running and ultra running kind of interchangeably, but Dave, you've got a funny way as to how you got into ultra running.
Yeah, so originally I was a track runner, and then I think I was 20 and I signed up for the Melbourne Marathon, ran that in about 3:15.
So, sorry, could I just cut in? What distances were you doing track running?
1s, 2s, 4s.
Yeah, right. That's a step up.
Yeah, I hadn't done any training runs further than about 18 Ks. I absolutely bombed in the last 5 Ks. I was on track until into the mid-30s for a 3-hour marathon because I decided that's what I was going to run.
Bombed out to a 3:15.
Yeah. I was absolutely cooked, and I went home and I went to the computer and I Googled what's further than a marathon, and the North Face 100 or UTA 100 as it is now was the first thing that came up, and it was October. That was the next May. Signed up on the spot. Yeah.
How did you go in that first North Face 100?
It broke me, but I finished in about 18 and a half hours, but my quads, everything blew up at some point. Yeah, those last couple of hours were some of the longer ones I've ever had in my life.
And did you do a slightly longer than an 18k training run in the prep when you moved from the Mara to
Before 100k
to the 100k?
Yeah, I think so. I don't really remember at this point, to be honest.
What about Gary Word trails? How have you found, like, based on your trail running experience, what's kind of different about the trails here? If you think of people who haven't been here before, is there comparable sort of trail?
I think for me, these are probably the most technical trails that I've found. The sheer variety of surfaces that you're running over, whether it's the rocks, whether they have the little scolitas and the burrows in them. You have areas where you have all the steps, you have the steel steps, you have the stone steps, and then areas where they built like those little British brick sections, and just the sheer variety and the amount of elevation gain and loss is just, yeah, it's huge.
I know that you're actually a geologist. Can you kind of describe in terms people can understand. I think you've already used one or two that might be beyond my vocabulary. But just describe the Garryword range from a sort of geological perspective and what people should expect to find trail running through it.
Yeah, so the rocks in Garryword are quite unique, and it sits in quite a unique position geologically within Victoria. So when you're standing up on the Front Range and you're looking east back towards Melbourne, there's a big fault that runs through Moyston and sits probably 10 k's outside the eastern edge of the Grampians, and that's called the Moyston Fault, and that separates the Delamerian origin, which is what we're in here in the Grampians, and the Lachlan origin, which is further to the east. And this is the biggest geological boundary in Victoria. And so the rocks we're on here, the basement, they're all 500 million year plus, very deformed rocks. And then what's further to the east is a bunch of younger Ordovician turbidites. So basically, if you were standing on this range 500 million years ago and looking out east, there's no Australia out in that direction. It's everything east of there has been accreted or joined to the continent of Australia in the last 500 million years. And so the rocks in Garryword themselves, they're called the Grampians group, and it's a mix of fluvial, so like river system sediments, and shallow marine sediments, and it's broadly broken up into three groups. There's the Redmond's Bluff subdivision, the Silver Band Formation, which is more mudstones, and the Mount Difficult group, which is once again a whole lot of limestones and shallow marine sequences. And these were deposited between about 490 and 430 million years ago.
A while ago?
A little while ago,
Yeah.
but teenage in geological terms. As you run up from Troopers Creek up towards Gar, you actually pretty well cross-cut this entire stratigraphic package. So in the elevation gain, you're actually crossing around about 50 million years worth of geological history.
Whoa, that's incredible. I think I need to do a bit more research on this, but I did reach out to Dave and sort of was just trying to get some hints as to if there's anything specifically unique to this section that we're talking about today, this section from Mount William to Jimmy Creek. Just sort of looking at Dave's reply here, you had me at stratigraphic repetition. Could you just sort of talk through that, Dave, and what that means?
Yeah, so after the sediments were deposited, they underwent a whole lot of shortening. And so this was originally about a 3,700 metre thick stratigraphic unit, and faulting has essentially doubled the thickness of that unit. So you keep seeing the same units repeated over and over adjacent to faults. Overall, the actual thickness of the sedimentary package that makes up the Grampians is about 6.5 kilometres thick.
So we're not even, like Mount William sits at 1167, so we're not even touching the surface of these rocks, Mount William being the highest peak in the range. You know, there's plenty going on underneath us that we're not seeing.
Yeah, so a lot of them are all tipped to about 45 degrees, and so that's what forms the really uncomfortable running surface that we're constantly encountering here.
We talked in a previous episode about running along the Canberra and sometimes needing a longer left leg or a longer right leg,
Yeah,
depending on which rock you're on.
yeah, longer right leg would be pretty good most of the time.
Or just turn around.
Yeah.
Run backwards.
Yeah.
Just more generally, Dave, do you have any favourite parts of the Garryword trails? Do you have a specific trail from a running perspective that you really love?
From a running perspective, probably going back down from Gar to Troopers Creek. It's just so technical, so quick, so fun. But I really love being out around the chimney pots, looking down the Vic Valley, just the view. It's a pretty peaceful place out there.
Whereabouts the chimney pots for some of those listeners?
They're in the southwest, just the western side of the Vic Valley.
The chimney pots are pretty striking. I mean, I just look at it and think it's a nice thing. But as a geologist, what do you get out of the chimney pots that, let's say, myself, who just sort of trundles around these areas, wouldn't know about?
There's a few units there that are a bit different. There's like a conglomerate there, which has these big quartz crystals in it, which always looks pretty cool. And the Vic Valley is dominated by a big granitic pluton. And so it's been baked a little bit itself. It's not really the geology that draws me to that particular spot.
Okay. Yeah. It's because previous episodes we've talked a fair bit about motivation and why we all get out and go running and this sort of stuff. I find it fascinating and interesting, but I don't understand much of what's going on with the rocks in the area. So I feel in awe that you've got this deeper understanding of what you're actually running on. I look around, see beautiful sceneries and look at this and look at that, but this is cool.
Yeah, the Grampians group itself is the recycled Delamerian origin. You're often running and sometimes you feel like you're running on a beach because essentially you're just eroding this sandstone. And so some of these rocks, they've already been through 2 or 3 orogenic cycles, 2 or 3 mountain building periods. They've been rocks, they've become sediments, they've been rocks again, they've become sediments, and now they're washing down into the plains, and eventually they'll be made into rocks again, into a new mountain range. Who knows when, hundreds of millions of years from now. There's just a cyclicity to it.
I've really got to ask this question so that I capture it on the podcast as well. But a lot of people talk about those tiny little bumps that you actually get quite a bit of grip on all throughout the Gary Word trails. And somebody told me that that was from ocean times when everything was sand and they were worms that would travel up through the sand vertically and leave a different deposit behind it. And then that deposit was harder than everything else. So it turns out everything else erodes away and you end up with these nice little bumps on the rock that give you grip. Is that true?
Yes. So in different places it certainly is.
Bombshell. You heard it here first.
Yeah, the technical term for those are scolithos. They form in shallow marine environments. They're essentially little burrows of worms that are digging down into the soft sediments on the ocean floor. They appear really strongly between sort of Gar and Werdug. There's a section and they stick out 2 or 3 centimeters. It's really an area where if you stack it, you're gonna do some damage.
You feel it on your knees, yeah.
Dave, you often go for some pretty adventurous runs and set up some pretty crazy routes. Like sometimes at short notice, you'll put a message out and be like, oh, hey mate, do you want to go for a 62k run tomorrow? What's been your biggest disaster run in terms of Gary Word trails that you've gone out and everything went wrong?
I've had probably 2 that really stick in the memory. The first one was running from Mount William Car Park back to Halls Gap. I ran out of food on the way up to Rosea, and by the time I came over Rosea, I had nothing in the tank. It was a long 15 Ks back to Halls Gap, and I was absolutely shattered by the time I reached town. And the other one was going out in the middle of summer, running from Halls Gap to Gar and back, and it was a 36-degree day, as a few people found out during the GPT last year, sitting up on those rocks along that ridge. You bake. I was very dizzy. I hadn't told anyone where I was. I didn't have a phone. So I was like, well, I've got to get myself out of this.
Seems to be a theme.
Do you have a snake bandage?
I did.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Bit too prepared.
And there were no salt tablets on the way up Rosea?
Sadly not, mate. That's a once in a lifetime.
You took them all, Mark.
They fell out of my bag and you found them later.
yeah, that's it.
Do you have any advice for people taking on Gary Word trails for the first time?
Just be kind to yourself. Don't expect to go fast. Just come out here and enjoy it. You'll probably be a whole lot slower than you thought you were going to be, just because things are technical, they're blocky, and it's hard running. If you're not used to running those technical trails, it's going to be slow, and it's probably going to hurt a lot more than you thought it was going to. So just come out here to enjoy it, and just enjoy the space, and don't bog yourself because you ran slow, because it's going to happen.
I reckon that's exactly right. Like, I remember when I first moved in, done a bit of trail running, I was shocked at the minute per K kind of average pace was so much slower. And, you know, been doing a fair bit of running at the Yuyangs, and I'm just like, oh, trail running, it'll be comparable, but there's so much slower than running in some of these other areas. And you have to adjust. You're like, well, no, it's the same perceived effort, but you are going to take more time now.
Narrowing down the trails a little bit in this podcast episode, we're actually exploring one of 12 sections specifically, which starts at the Mount William car park and it goes all the way through to Jimmy Creek. A few stats about this section is it's 19 kilometres long, so it is one of the longer ones. It's got an elevation gain of 775 metres and it actually goes downhill 1,400 metres by the time you get to Jimmy Creek.
This section, though, there's tons to it. I mean, obviously, you start at Mount William car park. You've got 2 kilometres along the road. I mean, that sounds boring, but the views are stunning, like sensational.
And it's steep. Like,
really, yeah.
There's not many people running up there.
No. It was really funny watching the stage race come out of the Mount William car park. Everyone's sort of there, they're pumped up and ready to roll. It's such a funny thing watching everyone sort of start running at the start of day 3, knowing that you're about to hit a wall. You can't even ride a bike up it, as in it's get off and walk kind of territory. The views are amazing, so go for a stroll. Obviously, you're walking at that rate. But anyway, that's only up to the top of Mount William.
It's definitely worth going past that main bit of infrastructure out to the cairn at the top of Mount William to have a look. So that's just on the north side of that bit of infrastructure up there, and some pretty amazing views from that section. And then heading back on the Peaks Trail, there's actually an interesting section. So you cross, it's a lot further than you think and you remember, and you've got about 4 little bumps that might go down around 50 to 100 metres, and then you got quite a big descent. Which is a pretty brutal descent down into Boundary Gap, and it's
pretty hazardous. Yeah,
it's hazardous, and the reason what happened when they were originally planning the alignment for the Peaks Trail, they were going to take it round the bottom of Mount William and link into Boundary Gap, so it was never going to go to the summit, but by that stage, they'd upgraded all of the existing tracks they were going to use, and they'd sort of moved on to building the new track. So they left this section of old track that was the old, I don't know if people remember old trails that were literally like you had to get from point A to point B in the fastest possible way. So it was usually like, we're at the top of the hill, we just got to get to the bottom, and you go straight down. So unlike most of the rest of the new sections of trail, which have been built to walking track standard gradients with designed to shed water and things like this, this is literally 200-metre descent straight down, and you've got big boulders and knee-high trenches that you're running straight down the side of the mountain. It's fun, but it's very technical.
Yeah, it's actually about a 200-metre vert drop to get down into Boundary Gap, and yeah, we should say it's a good bailout point. I know a few people have used it, bailout points where it's been pretty extreme weather up there. You can sort of bail out to down into Boundary Gap and go out the east side if you manage to phone a friend. Then walking out of Boundary Gap down the GPT, there's an amazing amount of steps. I have elevation showing on my watch, and my motivation is to get to 1040 metres above sea level. That is when you get to the end of the steps. I have to keep that in my head because I just think they're never, ever, ever going to end.
Yeah.
I reckon there's at the end of the steps, there's actually this seat, not quite up the top. You got to do a scramble up to the top of the summit, but the steps themselves are 655 steps. I think there's actually a segment called 655 steps.
Yeah.
And you get up the top of the amazingly built staircase, and there's this big rock seat that's been created with some amazing views sort of looking north. And then you got the scramble up through the escarpment to where you get to probably my favourite place of the whole park.
After Boundary Gap, I feel like that's kind of the plateau proper. And then for about 10Ks, you're running some very runnable terrain if your legs have still got energy.
I've run this section twice, and it's both been at night. One of those with Paddy, and I think visibility when we were going through there was about 5 metres.
That was quite poor.
It was quite poor. So I remember it, but I don't know what I saw because it was all white.
One of us had the idea that we needed some night training over that section.
I wasn't running the 100-mile, mate, so...
Yeah. And so we did it, and it was possibly the worst conditions you could do it in. It was cold, it was raining. It was one of those situations where you're moving your buff from I think I had multiple buffs, but one from your neck, one from your forehead, then had to shift them to your hands because your hands were getting cold, and I'd forgotten the gloves. And it was slippery, and Dave was much fitter than me. It was character building.
You weren't just doing this section, though, by memory. Weren't you doing the Redmond Road through to Jimmy Creek?
Redmond or even Burra Huts, one of the two.
Yeah, so you did all of episode 6 and now all of episode 7 in the one run at night time.
Yeah, we binge watched 2 episodes
of the Gary Word Trail Running Podcast.
The weather up there is so... I know we touched on, the subalpine area and some of the stuff you might experience at Rosea, but this is like the microclimate and the potential to be so much worse than the surrounding area. Like, you can easily get stuck in a snowstorm up there when it's actually quite fine down in the valley as well. So I think it was around August as well when you go. It was
a pretty valuable lesson for me. Like, whenever I'm talking about gear and stuff, I mean, I've heard other people say it, and it's not until you experience it that you realise, oh no, it actually is pretty important. Like, particularly for the plateau, you've just got to be ready for anything with weather conditions.
Failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
So wise.
Is that your soundbite?
I don't know, you were reflecting with me on this after the run, and you're like, yeah, I was cold and I didn't want to be there, so you just had to move faster. Like, that's the game plan.
I was pretty over it by the time we were heading down, and I was just like...
Over it.
Yeah. So I was just started bombing down the hill, but I had to wait for Paddy to drive him back to his car.
Yeah, I know. I felt pretty bad because I was definitely the slow link in the chain, but I would still say overall it was good fun.
Sometimes you've got to create your own warmth, though, don't you? Like, there are certain times when you're trail running where you're like, you know what, the wind chill factor is less than what I need to just develop some heat in my body. I've just got to start running. I've got to start working, and I'll warm up.
I was definitely on the limit of having enough clothes, and I was getting cold, and so I was like, yeah, got to move, got to keep that body temperature up.
The plateau does extend for 5Ks of running across the plateau before you sort of hit a precipice. There's a rock cairn at Derd, which is the high point of the plateau, which is exactly the same height from sea level as Dual or Mount William. Since leaving the Mount William car park, that's actually about 9.5 Ks along the trail where you hit that high point of Derd. And then the remainder is largely downhill to Jimmy Creek.
Just before we do get onto the downhill, I just want to reflect on the plateau a bit, because I do think it's like, I love the Vic Range, which you were mentioning in Chimney Pots before, Dave, but I think the plateau is my favourite part of the whole park. So you've got this, as you said, a 5K section of trail that's essentially this subalpine environment that for how many millions of years has been separated from any other vegetation. So most of the vegetation you find up there is not found anywhere else. It's endemic to the Grampians. And it's just this amazing experience that you're just in quite a special place. So I guess the whole park you get that. But I don't know, for me, the plateau, it just feels like you're in a very unique area.
You've also got a crown here, Mark, along the plateau.
I can tell you that this was a very blatant crown, this one, but it was it's interesting. I wouldn't mind reflecting on this while we got Dave and someone that's trained a bit, because this crown on the plateau. So I was quite proud of this one actually, because I think we've talked about the Ersk Valley Orienteers and the three of us having a bit of a races against them. Not a race. We thought we were racing. They were just well in front of us in the 2023 event. But they've got quite a number of the crowns heading north to south through this. So I think the Joe Dickinson has the crown for this whole section, which is a lightning about 1 hour and 50, which is, about 45 minutes, or probably more, probably closer to 50 minutes quicker than the fastest time I've done this section. But the reason I wanted to tell this story was this was on a training run that I was doing where I didn't have the confidence to do the stage race. And then I'm like, I'm going to do 4 days of running back to back. And if I can get through those 4 days and feel confident, I'll have the confidence to sign up for the stage race. And so on this particular run, it was day 4. It was the last day of my run. And I was taking it pretty easy, but I was feeling pretty good. And I got to that rock we were describing before up the top of the 655 steps just before you get to the plateau. And I'm just going to chill here for a bit and relax. I'm not in a rush. I'm sitting there and I'm like, and I was feeling good. I'm like, I think I can do this. I was settling in that, like, this is achievable. I can do this stage. Like, you can actually do this, put in the effort. And anyway, I'm like, I'd like to send it over the plateau. I got my phone out and I was having a look. I'm like, I wonder what the segment is on here. And I had a look and I'm like, ooh, that's quick. But I'm like, that would be amazing. And so I literally just got to the top and I'm like, okay, I think it starts here. And then just put the burners on it as quick as I could through to the cairn at Derd. And then I had to go a bit further because I'm quite sure where it finished. But anyway, I was like, and then I just basically walked all the way back to the car. But I was on such a high. I had this runner's high that I hadn't had in so long. And I was like, it kind of was such a great way to cap the end of that block that gave the confidence to then step up. And it's interesting, because after that, over the next few months leading into the event, I'd put in the work in the train. And putting the work is, it's something that I wouldn't mind unpacking a bit, like the importance of doing the training to be able to get through these things and to achieve results. I guess reflecting for me, I've got an event coming up, the same one you started with, Dave, in the Blue Mountains, the 100k in May. I was up there last weekend actually and just did a recce of the last 25k. It cooked my quads and I was like, ooh, hold on, I've got to do 100k in 6 weeks. And I'm like, and I was like, I didn't think I was that. And I had a look at my Strava and it's like, I'm averaging 50k a week in 6 hours a week. And I'm like, that is not putting in the work to do a 100k run. And I'm like, I need to lift the game a bit here or I'm going to be in a world of pain and probably DNF. So just interested in other people's reflection.
We've given a lot of Strava love on this podcast, and I think it's a bit of a laugh, but also I just think we're all sort of data nuts, and the Strava numbers don't lie. I find it really helpful when you say something like that, where you're like, hang on, I can just see that my effort isn't leading up to the result that I want.
I know you were talking to you the other day, Phil, going for a run, and you were talking the difference about your first marathon time and then getting to your times now and the work to put in to get there.
I've got a pretty analytical way of thinking about marathons and in road marathons specifically. When you're running on the road, you're reducing the number of variables significantly. Like in Gary Word, we're talking about so many different variables. We've got a 12-episode podcast talking about all the different sections because they do vary so much. Whereas road marathon is like this really pure kind of input in equals result out. Obviously, there are other things that get in the way. You've got injury, you've got unknowns and bits and pieces. But essentially, a lot of it comes down to the amount of work you put in is the result that you get out. And that's what I've experienced and what a lot of people I run with experience. If you want to get a certain time in the marathon, if you want to get, your 3.5 hours, sub 3 hour marathon, there've been graphs and Strava's been pretty good at releasing a fair bit of data showing, how many kilometers a week you need to sort of run or how many hours on your feet, depending on which metric you go with to get a sub 3 hour marathon.
It does certainly change a little bit as you get to ultra running. Ultra running, you actually don't need to run as much as you do if you want to get a high end marathon time. 2.5 to 3 hours. And part of that is you're just using your body so differently in that when you're out there for long hours, you basically don't leave your aerobic zone very often. When you're trying to run a quick marathon, you're really trying to sit at that peak performance and you want to have pushed your lactic threshold higher and higher. You want to be able to use that anaerobic zone much more consistently and then avoid tanking. And the changes to that anaerobic threshold are both harder and more time consuming to create than it is to vastly improve your aerobic system.
And probably take more time to recover from as well, like pushing to that.
Yeah, the struggle when you're running these long distances, especially with the elevation, is the body. So you sort of have to harden the body, but you don't need to run as many kilometers. You can push your body in shorter periods in harder little training sessions.
I think that's really well said. And on what you said, Mark, because Pat, I remember when you came to Halls Gap, probably similar time to me, I think you changed your Strava metrics. Because my Strava metrics are time on legs and kilometers per week. That's generally what I work on as a road marathoner. But you changed yours to time on legs and elevation. Is that right?
I do not look at distance
Don't
at
care
all.
about kilometers.
Well, I think if you're looking at distance in these areas, you'll make compromises about which trails you choose to run. Whereas like Vert gets you to amazing places around Gary Word, and time on legs is really important. But yeah, I feel like if I'm looking at distance here, I would kind of be always trying to chase some of those flatter areas.
Yeah. Something about a hill that just means you have to work to get your ass up there.
Yeah, like,
you just gotta.
I don't know if you want to run a kilometre vertical, like there's no way around that. A kilometre vert is a kilometre vert.
Well, I know the guests we had on previously, you just used to get dropped at the top of the hill and run down.
Yeah, shout out to Will if he's listening.
But what you're saying, Dave, and I suppose to your point, Mark, is that what we're talking about is preparation, isn't it? Like, as in, what do you do to make sure that you are prepared for the run that you want to do? But, you know, what race are you wanting to do? And then how do you prepare appropriately for that? Be it strength training or hills or what do you reckon, Dave?
It's important that each session has a goal. Just going out and running is great, but if each session you're actually working on something specific, whether that be a sprint session, a hill session, or it is just staying purely in that aerobic zone, like nice and easy, low heart rate, not working hard, that goes a big way to teaching your body to behave correctly when you're racing, and it will understand better what's going on when you hit that start line.
Have you had some experiences where you have put in the work and a couple where, you know, we haven't? Can you describe the differences in the experiences?
I guess like the first time I went to UTA, I didn't know what I was doing. I was making it up as I went along. Didn't understand nutrition, didn't understand training. If you're willing to suffer, you can always make it through. But
how much do you want to hurt?
Yeah, how much do you want to hurt? You kind of have a choice after that. It's like either this is going to be miserable, I'm going to quit, or I'm going to start actually thinking about what I'm doing and doing it properly. And so second year I went back, I'd actually had a actual training program with different sessions rather than just going out and running. I knocked 2.5 hours off the time I'd run the year previously. Still didn't really understand nutrition, and that came the third year. That third year, I knocked another 2 hours off. And so training's great, and you're constantly learning and you're constantly trying to do new things.
Is it part of the journey? The training's part of the journey? Is that the main part, or is the event the A race that you're aiming for? What you put in, what you're going to get out type thing? Yeah.
The journey is usually the part that you remember anyways.
I think there's some sort of sick pleasure in pushing through those tough points. I suppose for me, and I'm currently in a period, I'm literally sitting there right now ready for Ballarat Marathon in 4.5-5 weeks. I'm at that point now where I'm working too hard, tired constantly, always sore. It's this real grind, but like I said, there's this kind of like this perverted pleasure in knowing that, you know, I'll come out the other end. I don't know what it is. I've, you know, done it a few times now, and you work really, really hard, and, you know, you give up a lot. I don't know, maybe it's just I like buying new runners. I don't know, it might be that as well. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is exactly, but I do like the result that comes out of it. I like the training blocks, and I like the excuse to get out every day. I like the fact that it makes you in an otherwise really, really busy life, it makes you prioritize getting out and running, because otherwise I've got 20 million excuses not to get out. You know, for me to come up with these abstract goals, and in the road marathon, one, like as in, you know, is where I'm sitting, which is quick compared to some people, but really not very fast compared to a lot of people. You know, I'm just going to run a marathon, and that'll disappear into, you know, one of my own little weird goals that I made up for myself. But I had to sort of pull my finger out and do the work to get to there.
I mean, I feel like your average target of 3 minutes 43 seconds per kilometre, you're not going to do that easily. Like I feel like you've got to follow that process and trust the process and make sure that it actually put in everything you possibly can to get there.
Oh, exactly right. You don't want to be sitting there wanting at the end of it either. You're putting these hours into training and that sort of stuff. And at the end of it, you know, when you've done the race, you don't want to think, you know what, I should have just done a tad more. And, you know, I mean, I'm talking as someone who works hard and has friends and a life and that sort of stuff. I'm not giving up drinking a beer at the end of a hard day. I'm not an elite athlete. Let's make that clear. You know, I had a mate who used to shake his head at us. He'd be like, "Oh, mate, you guys drink beer? Imagine how good athletes you could be if you stopped drinking beer." And I was like, well, you know, there's a lot of things I could give up. You know, I could give up working, you know,
Yeah.
but there are things I need to do to get by. But yeah, one thing I was reflecting on though, as we're all talking, you know, we've all had a bit of coaching and that sort of stuff in our time. I've currently got a coach and I'm running with a group and that sort of stuff. Mark, you're the same. Dave, you're working with someone, aren't you?
Yeah, I got a coach at the moment. I picked one up in December last year. It's been amazing for me. You can see it there at the start of the week. You know what you got to do each day, and really robs you of excuses for not doing hard sessions and for not getting out. Even though I wouldn't say anything that I've learned through the coaching has been revolutionary or isn't something I've heard before, just to have someone there that's actually planning it out, and you just, as long as you do the work and you trust in the process, you should hopefully get where you're going. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it so far.
As far as the trail walkthrough goes, we got as far as the Derd highest point on the plateau, the 9.5 kilometre mark. So we've still got about another 9.5 Ks to go down to Jimmy Creek. It gets a bit sketchy after Derd for a short stint on the downhill.
It is. It's a pretty cool section of trail. It's about a K. They were meant to build a staircase, but then just forgot and left all the big boulders in their place that you got to try and scramble through.
I had a fair old moment in 2023, the event going down that boulder field. Did a bit of a double-footed slide down a very slippery rock for about a metre. I think I was trying to overtake some people at the time and looking pretty cool, and did this, like, that could have turned so ugly. Somehow I caught it, grabbed a few trees and didn't go face first.
I've definitely saved myself on tree roots down there.
Yeah, and after that bit, you get to the Derd hiker camp. After that, you have one more little hill up to a helipad, and then pretty much downhill all the way to Jimmy Creek.
It's a nice section.
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful. It's got a really nice flow to it too, as long as you don't blow up. Not speaking from experience.
The times overall for Sector 7, we've got some, I guess, no surprises up the top of the board. Again, from the Esk Valley Orienteering Club is Joe Dickinson set in 2023. He's got a 1 hour 54 minute for the whole Sector 7. So that's Mount William Car Park to Jimmy Creek, which is insane.
It's just not running for very long, is it? It's not getting full value, I feel.
That's just a morning jog, not
Yeah,
even.
it's like being really good at golf, you know? You just don't get the value for money.
For the women, the top time is Sophie Broom with 2 hours and 30 minutes. Sophie was part of the team relay, during the 2024 event. So that's another incredible time.
I wouldn't mind just reflecting on this run. I know I did the run. This was the longest run I ever did years ago when I was just first moved here and started running a bit more. I know we talked the last episode about the Sheep Hills. When I went the Sheep Hills to Jimmy Creek, the 28Ks, I did over Melbourne Cup weekend. I just remember just having the most amazing experience, except I did run out of what I was expecting to be able to get water up at this camp that was up there called Stockyard Creek. But it had been really dry and there was a couple of really dried up ponds, so I actually did run out of water. But I remember just having such an amazing experience, and what I was reflected on, and I get into Derd, there were a couple of wedge-tailed eagles just popped up behind the escarpment as I got up there and cruising around, and just the views back over the Sarah Range are amazing. Probably the thing that stood out to me most, the number of different vegetation types or kind of ecotones you pass through on this section run. Like, there's just so many. I remember getting down Derd hiker camp, but just before you get to that, you're into this field, and it was just this sea of white and yellow of these paper daisies, and it was like all these different types, and it was just such an amazing experience.
One memory that sticks out is absolutely during the 2024 GPT event. I had my pacer for that section was Dave Kingan. He rolled his ankle a couple of times on the really hazardous bit before Mount William Car Park, but still sort of pushed through. We got to the aid station at about 4 a.m. or something, and Dave's like, oh, no, I'm good to keep going. So we kept going and going up Mount William, and then went through Boundary Gap. So we got up the 655 steps and back up onto the plateau, and we're going along there, and he just rolled his ankle really badly for a third time and wasn't going to be able to keep going. So it was felt quite bad because, here I am, I'm just going to leave Dave up in one of the most inaccessible parts of the park.
You arsehole.
In the dark. Dave actually managed to walk on, I think he had about a 6k walk before somebody was able to pick him up. But I've got to say, as I was just midway between there and the end of the plateau, so it was that first light coming up, and it was just this incredible feeling. And I know everybody talks about it in big long races. When the sun comes up, you get this burst of energy, but up the top of the plateau, all of a sudden it had gone from this blisteringly hot day and very hot night to this nice, cool conditions, no wind, beautiful views, sun rising, and you just get so much energy. It was a really incredible memory for me for this section, although it is a little bit tainted because I still feel so bad for Dave having to walk out of there while I was enjoying this moment.
Having done the recce, having done it at night, would you encourage people, if they can, if they're planning to event, to actually do some reconnaissance of the section at night time?
Yeah, I really, really think it's worth it, particularly from Burra Huts to Jimmy Creek. I feel like that's the section that breaks a lot of people, and it is at night. Doing a recce at night, just make sure you've got a few people.
I was going to say, that's pretty pointy, and doing a recce over the hardest section overnight, as we've said, it's such a beautiful area. Like, the views are stunning. Do a recce at all. Do it during the day if you don't have the choice. Otherwise,
just make sure you've got a satellite communicator and people know where you are. That's true. Have some people ready to go and pick you up if something goes wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in previous episodes we've talked a little bit about gear and that sort of stuff. So yeah, you're saying, if you've got a satellite communication, I use a Garmin InReach Mini. I can text from it as well, which is good. I think the latest iPhones, we've always talked about it, using a Telstra SIM. We have no affiliation, but it's just got the best coverage. Tons of food. We've mentioned plenty of times. We've all run out of water.
Take gloves, because that's what I didn't do. Went around with Dave and regretted that.
Gloves, chuck an extra buff in, maybe 2 extra buffs.
Just before we close, I just had another question for our guest, Dave. Do you have any plans to enter any particular event in the GPT?
Undecided, mate. Undecided at this point.
Okay. Is there anything we can do to help you decide?
I understand that you had a big impact on Paddy's decision last year to sign up for the miler. I have a feeling, and we haven't actually unpacked that yet, so we should definitely touch on this.
Yeah, we should absolutely cover that. I was actually planning to upgrade from 2023 doing the team stage relay. I was going to go to do the stage solo. I was talking to Dave on a Friday night at the wine bar, and Dave was like, nah, just absolutely do the miler. And I'm like, Dave, I've never run more than marathon distance. Dave's like, no, you can absolutely do it. I can't think of anything harder than doing 4 of the world's hardest marathons back to back for 4 days. I'd rather just go and do the miler. I was like, oh, that's a good point. And anyway, as it turns out, Mark actually did the hardest 4 marathons back to back for 4 days. I did the miler. I'm super happy with the advice, not necessarily for how hard it was versus stage solo or anything. I just really enjoy that long, mental, challenging struggle, and it was good to hear Dave saying, oh, I know from where you are, because I've done these sort of things before, that you could definitely pick it up and do the miler. I know when you're looking the other way, having not done a miler before and you're looking up, it's like, nah, that's like completely not in my capability. But yeah, so thanks, Dave, for the encouragement, and I'm sorry that I didn't finish.
That wasn't your fault, mate. You said you were worried about doing 50Ks. I told you could do it next weekend if you wanted, and we went out 2 weeks later and you cruised into Halls Gap from Mount Zero to 50Ks, and you're like, oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I believe we were spotted by a few people who noted that I actually looked a lot more worse for wear than you, Dave. That was noticed by the onlookers. But no, I really appreciated the advice, and the 50K trial run was pretty instrumental at getting me over the line with entering.
Sometimes you just need a nudge in the right direction.
You haven't looked back since.
Well, he still hasn't run a miler.
At least I've had a go. Thanks again, Dave, for joining us as our special guest today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. We're on Instagram and Facebook if you want to keep in touch or send us a message as Gary Word Trail Running. We do a regular Friday morning run open to all paces, and I'm talking about all paces, from the extreme front runner rabbits to people that just want to walk, whatever we're doing that day. Or we do some more adventurous runs on the weekend, and yeah, you'll see them detailed on the socials. The next episode is going to be another exciting section that goes from Jimmy Creek to Yarram Gap Road. Looking forward to people tuning in then. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.